Okay, so good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As you've heard, my name is Raymond, and I have the misfortune of being the one to kick out the eminent panel. So bear with me. I'll just take a few minutes to drive a small message home. The other element of the misfortune that I'm faced with is I'm going to be the buzzkill. AI is not bad. It's actually unstoppable. We are in the fourth revolution. But the message, if you forget everything that I say this afternoon, is take a beat. That's why we're bringing the element of assurance. Okay? I'm not a teacher. I teach at times, but I'm not as experienced as maybe Daktari. But I have to throw in a definition. And the only reason why I'm throwing in this definition is because as of now, what we have done in most of the examples, especially within this region, is robotics process automation. So there are a lot of roboticized processes, but also AI is coming up. And the message is that the difference between robotics process automation and artificial intelligence is becoming thinner and thinner. So whatever we need to implement as of now from an assurance perspective, we need to practice it from right now. Not to wait until that level of AI that we're expecting to get to in the next few years is arrived at. Now, imagine that message. Okay? I play in the space that is called when things go wrong. And unfortunately, I don't just play in that space when things go wrong. I'm not called to correct the issue. I'm called and I'm blamed. And I'm told, where were you when something went wrong? So you've implemented an AI solution, and the result that has been churned out isn't right. And we start asking ourselves some questions. What should we have done as we are implementing the solution? You know, and coincidentally, it was in a CIO forum a few years ago. One of the keynote speakers gave an example that has really stuck in my mind. And she asked that if you're driving in the streets of Nairobi, and I think also, well, I haven't seen it much in other countries in terms of newspaper vendors selling newspapers in traffic. What newspaper or what article are you sold? Now, there is this type of newspaper that deals with business and business language. It's called Business Daily. So if the person approaches your car, do they give you the Business Daily? There could be another model of a newspaper that is about fun facts, okay, which would be slightly cheaper. So I'll avoid mentioning specific names. But do they offer you that newspaper? Do they sell you the property magazine? There is a direct correlation between the car that you're driving and what you're being sold. So before we even get to thinking about the complexities of AI and when it happened, our newspaper vendors have been doing it for the last couple of years, right? And that speaks to the data that they are using to make decisions. I've seen the parking lot. I've seen the big cars that you've driven in. But isn't there a day that you will take an Uber? Doesn't it mean that you will still have the capacity of buying that more expensive newspaper article that is designed for executives? So what we are speaking about is making sure that whatever solutions are being deployed are trustworthy. Are trustworthy from the organization's perspective in terms of what we wanted to achieve, our objectives in implementing AI, and are trustworthy by the consumers of the technology. You can imagine if I log into Daktari's website and I get some bad news that I'm going to die today. And I go and tell my wife, now I need to spend all my money. And then I end up not dying today? Who takes the blame? What are the things that we need to consider? What have we dealt with from a corporate governance perspective? What are we thinking about in terms of ability, okay, to explain? Because one of the tenets of AI is that it must be explainable. Whatever solution you provide and the result that comes from that solution, you must, as a human being, not the AI, as a human being, be able to explain because you're the one who trained. And we're talking about the element called taking control of your AI and driving the assurance behind your AI. Okay? What happens when the AI gets the decision wrong? Who takes responsibility? What will you do to immediately correct? And we've seen, I mean, the first keynote speaker pointed out a couple of very gross errors that have happened in implementation of AI across the world. And I can tell you, even within this country, from a robotics process automation and some element of AI, there are institutions, and the example that comes top of mind is, that have granted a loan based on analysis to a person who could not end up servicing that loan. And it's because of errors in training or consumption of data that is not applicable to the set that the solution is being provided to. So that speaks to what we expect and the risks that we need to consider when deploying AI. So we can speak about incomplete or poor quality of data. Okay? Leslie spoke quite a number of times and mentioned data is very important. If you've noticed, especially if you're attached to the financial sector, this is the month which they report their results. And you will see there's a delay in reporting the results. Other organizations would report a bit earlier, but this year there has been a bit of a delay because of the uptake of another monster called IFRS 9. And IFRS 9 involves building models, and you have to build those models using data. One of the biggest challenges that we have is that the data that is available is not right. So yes, you have to use the right data. As we've said, use data that is representative of the set that you're deploying the AI solution for, but also the data must be correct. You have to consider the legal risks. We're talking about ethics, okay? And here we're talking about who should be part of the team that is constituted to deliver AI solutions. Cyber. I'm a consultant. My wife also happens to be a consultant. I don't know how it happened. But for those of you who understand consulting business, there's always a deadline that has to be met. So some mornings, when we are in the same car coming to work, we have a chat before we leave the house and we ask each other, who has the most critical deadline? And the person who has the most critical deadline doesn't get to drive. So that you can do the work as the other one is driving. So would we benefit from having a self-driven car? So that the car just takes us to work as both of us are working. But what happens if that car knocks down a pedestrian? What was done to prevent that? Who takes responsibility for that particular action? Cyber. What happens if algorithms that are being used in driving these technologies are tampered with to give the wrong solution? Okay? We've spoken about algorithmic bias. I mean, we've just, again, from a HR solutions perspective, just because of what used to happen in the past, because you fed an AI solution, you've trained it on past data, they've seen that the rates of hiring men in a certain job type is higher than women. So the AI solution, based on consuming that data, determines that it is preferred to hire people of the male gender. So what have we done to ensure that the solution does not pick up on that? Wrong programming. And most importantly, reputational risks. Once it goes wrong, it is very hard to come back from it. And not directly related to AI or whatever. Think about stories like Cambridge Analytica. Okay? When something goes wrong, reputation is key. And of course, from an assurance perspective, I have to speak about the 3 lines of defense. What do we do to get it right. The typical 3 lines of defense, and first of all, you have the first line where we have the line that identifies the risk. And in this case, it is the risk in deploying that AI solution. The second line that is tasked with continuing to monitor. And the third line is independence assurance. So typically, same thing as we are talking about implementation of AI solutions, we would still need to deploy the same lines. But because we are becoming agile, and everybody is speaking about being digital, so we are not saying that you get an auditor with a skill set. Remember, what will you be doing from an assurance perspective? There are 3 or 4 components that make up your AI solution. There is the data. We've spoken about getting the right data. Okay? There are the algos that are driving the solution. Then we have the people, so getting the right competency. Okay? And then number 4 is the technology. What you need to do to protect the technology from cyber attack, from recovery and etc. Okay? So have you implemented within the teams, because as I said, I get called when things go bad. And I don't get called to make things right. I'm blamed. So what I want to do is I want to request to be part of the team that is developing these solutions. And the whole space of talking within digital is about having tribes. And the tribes are constituted to include all the required skill sets, including an assurance function whose role is not to stop the innovation, but to ensure that the innovation meets its objectives. Okay? And because of the conversation that I have with one of my colleagues, because he says, I speak about assurance because I'm scared AI will take away my job as a technology consultant and practitioner, I've intentionally called it the rise of humans. It is not the rise of machines. It will only be the rise of machines if you sit down and not do anything. A few years ago, people used to dig using stones, for example. What happened? Machines were invented that could be used for plowing fields faster and more efficiently. The person who sat on his hands and didn't do anything probably died. But the person who taught themselves how to maintain these machines survived the revolution. Actually, sorry, I shouldn't use the word survive, overcame the revolution. So from an assurance perspective, what skill sets have we put together to be able to deal with some of the risks that are highlighted here? When we are talking about having someone in your AI development team that reminds you that, hey, as we are taking this data, as we are using our customers' data, we are supposed to ask them for permission. Now, as I said, I'm the buzzkill. I have seen very many solutions in this country, not even out there, but I do not remember them asking me for my permission. And I'm speaking especially to where there's a lot of proliferation in the financial services sector, where we are deploying technologies and apps and we are consuming our customers' information, but have we asked them for permission? Will somebody come back and after you've deployed this wonderful solution, they tell you, hey, you made a mistake here? We're talking about the proper type of testing. A few years ago, I did a nice little course on testing, and one of the key components of testing is testing can never be complete. If you are to test a calculator, a basic, not even a scientific calculator, it would take you a couple of years to go through the functions. So what level of testing of an AI solution is acceptable, depending on criticality? If you're deploying a solution that is supposed to look into my face and tell me if I have cancer, and another solution that will tell me what color bubble gum I love, which one will I spend more time in testing? Will I risk sending a patient into chemo, yet they do not need that chemo? Okay? What happens in terms of operational? Remember, as you're teaching the AI and as you're providing the data that will be used for teaching, there will be corrections that will be made. Who has access to make these corrections? I can tell you from a consulting perspective, one of the most sought after services right now is code review. So if there is code running behind whatever solution you're deploying, who knows what it's doing? Can it go rogue? Who has access to it? Will my wife and I be in our self-driven car heading north, and then somebody decides that I should not make that meeting, and they hack into the car and make it turn left, go to the east? What are the assurance functions that we have deployed within design, implementation, and operation to make sure that the solutions and the focus is not taking care that things don't go wrong, but the focus is meeting the objectives. So don't hate the assurance guy. The assurance guy is just here to help you make sure that whatever you want to achieve at the end of the day is met. Okay? So AI assurance is not just about avoiding risks, because there are very many ways of avoiding risk. I mean, somebody said this morning that you can just switch off your computer. The link between working with a computer and productivity, and you will be safe. But how do you leverage? How do you ensure that you have applied the necessary controls to make sure that the objective is met? My son, small boy, less than 3 years old, uses YouTube. And I was told, for children, get them YouTube for kids. So it's amazing how, I don't know if it's the newer generation, that he can actually navigate through the screen. So YouTube Kids has algos that are supposed to filter out content that is not for children. But within the same technologies, there are blips. On occasion, I can go, and I'm telling you of a real-life situation when I'm finding my son is watching something that I wouldn't necessarily give them to watch. So applying this to the wonderful ideas that are in this room, okay? To all the exhibitors that are here, and whatever is being presented out there, what have we done from an assurance function to ensure that, not to ensure that something does not go wrong, but the objectives of what the solution was supposed to provide have been met. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions? Don't ask hard questions. I only allow them after lunch.
Any questions from the audience? Please raise your hand. Okay. Yes. No.
Hi there. Your presentation was good. Very, very concise. Thank you. What, I think I'm probably one of the naive people when it comes to the future of AI. Right now, we can understand that there's a little bit of artificial intelligence, and certain functions will become easier over time. But do you foresee in the next, let's say, 100 years, key decisions of even government being done by artificial intelligence rather than humans?
Wow, 100 years is a long time.
Or, okay, let me shorten it, 50 years.
Now,
or even 20 years.
Well, based on what we are discussing, and by the end of the next 2 days, really, the sky is the limit. Look at how revolution, from the agrarian revolution to where we are right now, the things that we are able to do, and the things that we were not able to do then, and the capacity that we have provided, okay, in being able to meet these sort of repetitive, mundane tasks. So the question being, will there be key decisions that are made by artificial intelligence? In my view, yes. Now, the tricky thing is in the uptake. And the uptake is linked to trust. Will we trust these solutions to make those decisions for us? And the only way we can build such solutions to make such decisions for us even if we understand that technology is inevitable, is by deploying appropriate assurance at development method, during development. Not as an afterthought, not after an AI solution has sent us to war and we were not supposed to go to war in the first place, but getting it right during the implementation. Yes.
Thank you.
There's one more question.
Thank you very much. My name is Oscar. I just want to pick your mind, and probably the initial panels that were here. I can see Dr. Ndemo left. There are three. The current GDP is troubled by three areas within the economy, particularly our country today, and one of them is corruption. Another one is terrorism. And lastly is road safety. And probably to surprise you, many people die on the road than they are being killed by terrorists. I don't know what you can tell us as in the impact of AI in supporting our governance structure and delivering support in this aspect. Thank you.
I'll take a gander at the question, but I believe Honorable Michael will also weigh in at some point in time, knowing the work that he's done in the task force. We, at some point in time, were to get, within the context of this country, number plates that had chips, where if you're stopped and somebody scans that number plate, they will tell that this number plate is linked to this chassis, is supposed to be of a car that is red in color and not white in color, like where it has been stuck right now, okay? There will be forces, okay? And that's just what we have seen. In terms of the impact of AI and other technologies, other emerging technologies will help in solving very many problems that are simple and that are hurting us, and they're very simple to resolve right now. But unfortunately, and again, I come back to where I was saying the rise of humans. If there is no human goodwill, if there is no intentional support to these technologies that we want to deploy, then the impact that we would realize in curbing these evils would be negated. Okay. Honorable Michael, thank you, too.
So just very quickly, especially on the road accidents, and I think, remember when I spoke and I said that there's a lot of things within the public domain that we're not making use of. So I'll put that as straight away, that is a great business case, a business idea. You know, I think the insurance industry knows how much they're losing with respect to all the accidents that are going on, the rogue, the rogue things that are happening. NTSA knows how serious that is. So, it just takes somebody, and through the help of AI, to link up a whole lot of data sets. And therefore, you can actually have, for example, a portal that will tell you that, when you're traveling, like during the high season of Christmas, do not board Matatu's number, this, and that, because either their, the chases is not legal or whatever it is. At the same time, you heard the principal secretary mentioning about the Huduma number and things like that. That is because there are so many, there's a lot of people who are holding independent data sets. And within the back, there is a great resolve that there must be cooperation that will probably not happen within your view, so that various different government agencies are actually able to see things across. And therefore, you find that the whole idea, for example, like behind the one Huduma number and the biometric is that you can tell that, for example, that I do not have a PSV license and I should not be driving a car of a certain stature or a certain capacity. So yes, to tell you there's a lot of things that AI can and is already doing with respect to the things that you're saying. I think the only and I guess that's why we're here within the World AI Summit, is that we're here to learn that what is it that we need to be cognizant of, and what is it that we need to start applying now within the various case studies that you said, and they go right across to health. And I could go on and on and on and on. So there's very many areas in which you can apply just exactly what you've said in terms of solving those problems.
I think there's the last one.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Now there's a case whereby, okay, based on what you presented, we have this social rating already happening in China. I was watching a certain documentary, technology documentary on Click, and people now are rated as being a good citizen, an average citizen, or a delinquent. And based on that, you can be in prison, as in an open-air prison, whereby if I'm considered a bad person or the government considers me a bad person, there are certain services I won't be able to receive. And that AI that is implemented in that system is taught by that government. So, for example, we could have political prisoners based on the government in power at that particular point. What measures can we put in place to avoid such things from happening?
It's very hard for you to have a conversation about something that is taking a task that should be done by a human being who is assumed to, or is expected to do the right thing. Because, I mean, even human beings can make biased decisions based on, maybe in that case, political alignments or something. So it's expected that there are ethics that are applied when we are developing some of these solutions. And the ethics extend to such notions like that, in terms of ensuring that what the objective that was meant to be met by the AI is clean, if I can use the word clean. Of course, it depends on who is the one who is behind that solution. Of course, there are other objectives that are well intended, okay, but they end up, because of changes or somebody else taking it up and also, or corrupting that particular solution. Remember, we spoke about cyber attacks on existing codes. They end up changing the objective of that solution. So what solutions can we embed? First of all, there must be a framework. And the framework has to be driven from someone who can manage both public and private interests. And that means the government, okay? Now, it's not giving all the responsibility to the government, but frameworks must be established to drive what is this AI thing that is being deployed, okay? I think Timothy mentioned in the morning that regulators will now start coming up to say, what is this AI solution going to do? Remember, there's somebody who is the person who is in control has to be able to drive to make sure that whatever end game this AI is supposed to meet is for the benefit of humanity. So the first thing is governance. And then number two, and most importantly, and sorry, I'll keep going back to it, is assurance. Such that you ensure that whatever objective was set up, if there is an update that is being done to the code, okay, it is done within controlled, and there was a pretty busy slide that I put up, within control mechanisms that are driven from inherently and from an organization perspective and from the person who is working on the solution, such that whatever is coded and updated in the code still remains to meet that initial objective. So frameworks must drive it, and a very clear understanding of the objective of the solution, so that it is not adulterated, okay, in the future, or even if it is changed, or even if the objectives are changed from a strategic perspective, it still retains the moral objective of that AI. Remember, at the end of the day, it all starts with self. What are you going to do as an individual in terms of the kind of data that you're providing, in terms of what you accept when you know the way you install that app that you saw your friend using, and then you say, do you mind? You say, yes, yes, accept, accept. It will have access to you, accept, accept, accept. What kind of awareness are we driving out there from ourselves and for the rest of the teams that we work with, so that we assure or we put in some sort of control that the solutions that are deployed are not harmful. Hope that helps. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. So you'll find Raymond around in the exhibition area as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask him. Thank you very much, Raymond.
Thank you so much, Tim.